Yeah.
Hold on.
So like I can get us started. Like some of the things that I wrote about when I see the Fool, what comes to mind is this sense of carefreeness.
Mm-hmm.
This idea that I always think of the Fool as being high on the idea of a thing, right? So sort of high on the concept, high on whatever it is motivating the Fool to take that leap, to step off that cliff.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the Fool is really kind of fixated on in that moment, right? That's all that matters. There's nothing really outside of the pureness of that particular concept. I'm also really struck by the fact that he's got a really teeny tiny, or the Fool has a really teeny, gender, not gender specific, right? But that the Fool has a really teeny tiny knapsack. You know, it's like if the Fool had any idea where the Fool was going to end up, that knapsack might be a little bit bigger. I don't know, or maybe would have packed a couple more sandwiches or something, right? So I always think that there's that sense of a little bit of naivete, right? Which is like, hey, you think you're just going on a hike through the park, but really what's happening is you're going on this major adventure, right? Which is peaks and valleys and mountains and streams and rivers and oceans and all of this kind of stuff. And that I think the Fool is sort of I say willing to go it alone, but there is this little four-legged creature, right? The Fool's dog. So the Fool is not truly alone at all, right? So you have this wonderful
Right.
this wonderful spirit guide in a sense, right? You can use that language that is coming along with. And I've read these different interpretations that sometimes the dog is like, oh, the dog is warning, you know, you're going to fall off this cliff, right? I don't know if you have read some of those interpretations of the dog. It's sort of the dog is sort of this level of consciousness that's saying, hey, wait, you're getting ready to stop off and sort of jump into this, not jump in, but fall into a ravine. Or the dog is saying, hey, I'm here with you. I'm going to go right on with you. So those are some of the things that come to mind when I'm thinking about the Fool. So I said that little dog sure is cute. Reminds me of my puppy.
Did you write that?
Reminds me of my puppy.
Oh, sorry, I moved it by accident.
You got all kinds of power with this Jamboard. So what other things did you guys came to mind when you think of the Fool?
So I said carefree, distracted, has guidance available, meaning the dog in this particular instance, but not necessarily heeding it. Happy-go-lucky, no cares, no worries, seemingly no responsibilities, on a journey traveling to an unknown destination at the beginning of the journey. So like, you know, he's got that spirit guide there, and it's different in all these decks. Like one is like a cat, one is like birds, whatever, one is fish, but they're not paying attention. They're up, their mind is up there in the clouds.
So I read a little bit about the history of the implications of the name the Fool. That originally the Fool didn't mean innocent and you know and ultimately anarchist. Anarchist in the spiritual term, spiritual meaning of the term, not the political meaning of the term. But originally the Fool meant crazy, because in Italy, where tarot originally comes from, that's the meaning of the word Fool. But as the deck sort of migrated, you know, into different cultures, a Fool, you know, you get into other parts of Europe, and the Fool becomes the jester. And so still within that archetype, we have both of those. We have the jester, and we also have the crazy person. And what it calls to mind to me is in India, you have these people that are called avadut, who appear to be utterly crazy. They don't wear clothes. Oftentimes they don't bathe. They don't, you know, and they're just in complete ecstasy all the time, in connection with the divine and realization of the divine. And you know, and they're not paying attention to anything, you know, and they're not affected by anything, which some would say is the goal. But the fool is also in the beginning, and it's interesting because he has heeded the call to adventure. He's about to step off of the heat because he's got his knapsack with him, right? But he hasn't stepped over the threshold yet. Well, not in most decks. In some decks, he already has. You can see him already stepping on the path. But he has this sort of, or the actually one of the decks I like, one of the decks I really like. It's, she's female, but the fool has this uh, um, sort of Teflon nature, if you will, or lotus-like nature. Lotus is considered to be sacred because in the in a pond, on a lotus flower, you can get dirt on a lotus flower. You can, you know, everything and it sloughs off, and the flower remains pure, right? So, but anyway, and so the fool is like that, and the fool is untouched by, you know, sort of conventional uh, cause and effect in a way. And so so a fool can speak truth to power. And I wrote, you know, what comes to mind is Dave Chappelle. You know, what comes to mind is comedians, actual gesture at comedians, because a comedian can speak the truth in such a way that you know, and get away with it, you know, in such a way that no one else in society can. When I was in graduate school, one of my professors said that comedians are postmodern ministers, right? Postmodern pastors in a way. Um, I can tell you, I won't pay attention to a pastor who's not funny. So I guess that's true. Uh,
You
but
are,
but but in any case, you know, but also you see, you know, the dangerous aspect of that too, because the fool is in fact about to jump. As far as we can see, the fool is in fact about to fall off a cliff, and so you have that danger element in there as well. And you see that also in the narrative of Dave Chappelle. You know, everybody thought he was incredibly crazy, absolutely crazy, when he dropped the, you know, $30 million, and he never was paid for that. He never got that money. He dropped $30 million to leave his show, you know, and everyone thought he was crazy. They came up with all these conspiracies as to why, but in fact, he was following his heart, which is ultimately what the fool does. Now, the thing with the fool is very Aristotelian in the sense that the fool does not know. The fool has this yearning in the heart, but the fool doesn't know how that's going to unfold, right? So it's the always, already, not yet aspect of that.
real different from the jester, right? Because the jester is, as you were describing it, the jester is incredibly aware,
Right.
because that's the only way they can make those connections, right? So this idea that the fool is is innocent is probably not a really accurate way to I mean, that's an aspect of the fool, but it's probably not really, at least what you're talking about, Kurt, here, it doesn't seem to align with that idea.
Well, it also depends on how one characterizes innocence too. You know,
Not worldly, let's say not worldly, not somebody who's been out and who understands the nature of people, perhaps.
because you can
Human beings.
be childlike and be aware at the same time.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's you know, because when one ceases to be childlike is when one sort of ascribes value onto something above something else,
Mhm.
you know. And the fool doesn't operate that way. I'm trying to think of anything else that
It comes to mind.
yeah, I mean, and I listened to read a lot of passages about the fool today to get ready for today. And one thing that, you know, and it apparently, my favorite deities are associated with the fool. Krishna, Dionysus, Apollo are all associated with the Fool because they operate outside of convention. And I posted at the back of the Jamboard, I think the last card I posted actually is from the Mythic Tarot, which is a Greek based Greek imagery, and it's Dionysus. So I thought that was kind of cool. But yeah, and actually the Chrysalis Tarot has, interestingly enough, has Merlin as the Fool. You know, you think Merlin would be the Magus, but
Yeah.
Merlin is the Fool.
These
And
are some-
maybe Merlin's the Fool because you can keep going. There's a bunch of them on there. Yeah, see, there's
the opening.
that's yeah, and that's and see, that's from the Dark Goddess Tarot, and what the and what they're trying to do there. That's an Irish I can't pronounce it, but those goddesses are on, they function a lot like gargoyles. They're actually on churches, but that is a vulva, and it's like a hag figure. It's like a crazy hag figure who is exposing her vulva. So you have both of those. You have both the innocence and the sort of craziness
Yeah.
in the image. But the only way that I can sort of conceive of Merlin as the Fool is that Merlin's figured it out. So you have your awareness at the same time, like you're talking about the awareness of the gesture, but you also have the innocence in the sense that Merlin has, in other words, Merlin has no desire. Merlin has no material desire, no desire for material gain outside of the divine purpose, right? Outside of, or as they would say in the Western tradition, outside of the great work, right? And so yeah, there's Dionysus there, the last card. That's from the Osho Zen Tarot, the card on the far left there. He's
Yeah.
And here we have this one in the middle. Was that the Good Tarot that seems to be capturing that child like, sort of doesn't have that time of development that isn't really gender specific identified, sort of like this all genders to some degree feel like that they're hanging out there in that card.
I mean, I can remember just from my own journey spiritually, when I was 15, 16, I used to do all these rituals and all the books, all the Llewellyn books, I get all the Llewellyn books and I do like all the, and it was very much like, in the sense that, all this stuff is great until they screw something up, until you have like a, not a fool anymore, right? So yeah, but the fool's, I guess, jovial qualities is also a protective quality in a way. I don't know.
So I'm typing a question here, actually 2 questions, and in the chat.
Oh, in the chat.
I think you just said something, Kurt, that said, yeah, let's go there. This idea of, what is it that we like about the Fool, and at the same time, what is it that we dislike about the Fool, right? So I'm going to go ahead and post that in the chat, so you can take a moment here and think about what do you like about the Fool, and then what do you dislike about the Fool? And then you guys can just, as your answers come to you, just like we did with the sticky notes, just stick them in the chat. So that here. I can't wait to hear about Flavor Flav. They both love, like, and dislike. Jumping in with his or her whole heart, no holds barred, living life from his heart. Space 111%. I like the fool is willing to take the adventure to experience the necessary next step without regrets. Don't like the vulnerability, the getting hurt so deeply along the way. You know, those lessons, right, that come with it. When you take that great risk, you're risking the hurt as well, as much as the joy and the pleasure and the learning, you're risking all of it. I like that it looks like it means to go forth with an open heart. I like that, you know. What I dislike about the fool is it is not needing to control an outcome, which is really, I think, more that I wrote that's more an indicator about me and sort of the fool spaces that I've certainly been in before, and the kind of conundrum I found myself when I didn't, ask enough questions before I left, right? That kind of thing. The best and most dangerous aspect of the fool is a trusting nature, a requirement for initiation, right, on the path, but at the same time, potentially perilous. Definitely, right? That sense of, I guess the question is, do you, because if we're looking at this from the fool's journey, which is what we're starting, we're essentially doing, that's our study, right? Is the fool's journey. And you think some of these perilous situations, or what we might consider perilous situations that are captured by the various tarot on the different cards in the major arcana, right? And so there's some of these cards that really come sort of not quite, a little bit further than the middle of journey, right? They come a little bit later. Thank goodness, the fool has developed maybe a little bit of thick skin, but not enough thick skin that they, that resiliency that comes from those lessons. Let's see. I don't like that there's little regard for the possible consequences of not paying attention to what could happen. Yeah. I've had numerous fool moments since I became the chair of my department. It's sort of like, and then in hindsight going, why didn't I ask more questions? And quite frankly, I just didn't have the depth of knowledge to be able to ask, you don't know what you don't know kind of thing, to ask those questions. But yeah, I think I love this question, the what do you like? And sometimes I ask you like the what do you love and the what do you hate, right? So I said, what do you like and what do you dislike? But we could even go with those really intense ideas as well.
I would imagine completing a project with the fool on your team would not be easy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if you're at work and you're on a committee or you had a project, and one of your team members is the fool, which is how I feel about how people feel about having me on their team. But yeah, I mean, I would imagine it would be incredibly frustrating because they would have these moments of brilliance and then these moments of staring off into space. So
like, there they go. Yeah, I love it. I'm sure that I probably, to some degree, bring that sort of full moment, to the table. Definitely.
But you're going to be the Hierophant because you're the chair of the department, right?
Yeah, well, it depends on the day.
And the chair of our group, basically.
Well, I mean, this idea of like, and fully going on and saying, I've got this idea, but you guys might hate it. And if you do, let me know so we could do something different, right? So I think the fool, that would be maybe an embodiment of the fool energy, right? Is not being so, it's a little bit of a, you know, I guess the question here is the fool really idealistic, right? Is the fool, you know, sort of committed to this beautiful kind of idea, and is what sets the fool off onto the journey to begin with, potentially, right? That's one way to look at the fool.
I would say the fool upright, certainly. The fool reversed, and you have Flavor Flav. Actually, Flavor Flav embodies both aspects of that because I don't know. I'm talking. This is my age, and also, you know, if you look sociologically, you know, Public Enemy was some black dudes in New York talking about empowerment, but they're the people that purchased their tapes and stuff in the 80s were white dudes driving pickup trucks. So it's a very American it's a very American conundrum. But now Chuck D, you know, wrote these beautiful, you know, intense, you know, lyrics about, you know, self-empowerment and so forth. But he knew he couldn't just go out there and spit that stuff. He had to have a jester with him, right? So that was Flavor Flav. So in that aspect of Flavor Flav was wonderful because he made the whole scenario work. Where Flavor Flav flips, right, is Flavor of Love, right? Right. That's the, you know, that is the absolute, you know, worst potential aspect of the fool. Just somebody who clearly not. And I think that this just came to my mind, but I think it's what a lot of people are kind of getting. The fool can be an absolute drain on society and on one's psyche, right? And that's what Flavor of Love, you know, that's what the Flavor of Love was. You know, he, you know, it became to embody just the yuckiness of our culture in many ways. But yeah, you know, and if we look at the Rider-Waite system, which is a lot of controversy behind it, because a lot of people say, well, that Edward Waite, because he was under oath from the Golden Dawn, there's a lot of stuff that he kind of skewed or whatever. But Crowley just didn't give a crap about his oaths that he took, and so he actually revealed all of it a little bit later on. And so in any case, the fool represents the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and also represents what's called Ein Sof, or basically the divine that is ultimately unknowable. And so that's kind of where ideally the fool hovers, or that's where the fool is drawing. I should say that's where the fool is drawing inspiration. And the fool is the opening of the mouth to draw breath. Really, the fool hasn't done anything yet. The fool's about to do something, and we don't know. Like we've been saying, we don't know. Is this person, you know, inspired in some way? Is this person going to just fall flat on their face? You know, is Lassie going to be able to pull him out of the well? We really don't know. The dog in one interpretation I saw was Taliesin's dog from the Celtic myth of Ceridwen and Taliesin, and there's another image where rather than a dog being there are ravens, and so the fool is looking off at the ravens, and the ravens are the ravens of Ceridwen who are guiding the fool on. And that's actually a more optimistic image, that there's a guide there, you know. But actually, I wonder if there is somewhere a deck that has like a little Lassie that's like way in there. So, you know,
I imagine there are, right? I mean, you know, a spirit. I mean, if you look at the animal as a spirit animal or spirit guide or whatever. I also, you know, maybe this is naive of me, but I think about a spirit guide as sort of morphing into that which is needed at the time, kind of like the room of requirement in Harry Potter, right? It's like, this is what I need in this particular moment, and it becomes that thing. And I don't wonder if that is I mean, I think about the dog as a spirit guide in that way, which is truly that sort of being able to sort of morph into, it has a kind of wisdom already, right? That is able to then assist as needed, as the situation, or as whatever, you know, if the fool is dropping off into whatever it is, it's motivating the fool to make that next step, that leap, that dog is going to, whether it's a dog or whether it's a raven or whether it's whatever it is, that's the beauty, I think, of spirit animals, and the concept of them is that they are shapeshifters, essentially, and they shape into that which is necessary for the situation.
That's what the cards do too. I can't remember what card it was, but it was. I was looking at a card today, and there was a some kind of vulture or some kind of bird on the card. But I promise, the look that that bird had on its face on that card, my dog has given me so many times. And the look was absolutely, Daddy, you know you shouldn't do that.
This sort of,
You know?
are you sure? So that's a great, Kurt, you come up with all of these wonderful things that sort of like prompt this next idea, which is, if you had an opportunity to say anything to the fool, what would you say?
Well, and I want to interject something funny before we move on to that question. So you had posted in here, what I dislike about the fool is not needing to control the outcome. And I was not reading it, I was listening to you speak it. And I wrote in my notes that that was something I liked about it.
Yeah.
Hence that whole life lesson of why do we have expectations? Let's all let them go.
Yeah.
So, moving on to your question now, sorry.
No, you bring up a really amazing point, right? Because that's the piece that rubs, right? It's like, I have this beautiful pair of shoes and I love them, but there's this piece that rubs, right? Or whatever, right? I mean, it's being able to be comfortable with both of those things. Like, there's this part of me that just wants to, and I have done this certainly before, where I'm like, whatever, I don't need a plan. We're good with that. We'll just go with it. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll walk into certain circumstances, and part of what it is, other people expect me to have some kind of a plan, right? A little bit of a roadmap or something. It doesn't have to be real detailed, but an idea. I walk in, I don't have an idea, and they look at me like deeply betrayed because it's supposed to have this kind of thing happen.
Well, and I'm speaking more non-professionally, more relationally between like us or whatever.
Yeah. But, I think it's sort of an extension, right? I mean, because that's who I want to be, say, for example, in my non-professional life. And I would like for that to eke out a little bit into my professional life as well. But then what happens there is you run into all of these other kinds of the resistance to that, right? So it's just the resistance to that.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean about the tension between those two things. It's like I love it and I hate it. And when I tend to hate it is when I end up finding myself in that space where I'm like, oh, this is a lesson and it hurts, right? Or
We know that you do it when you do yearly evaluations of faculty.
Mm-hmm.
I know I have to do mine coming up, so yeah.
Yeah.
Nobody likes that, right?
Yeah. So I would just,
necessary, but nobody likes it.
Everybody gets nervous around it, anxious about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you had a chance, we all have a chance to talk to the fool and say, what would you say to the fool? What would you say? Talk back to power.
I went about this all wrong.
I did about the same thing, real close to that, and then I changed it to a question.
There's no wrong, there's no right or
I'm
wrong.
gonna leave mine because that's what I say.
I love it. Some of us came at it from asking the Fool to impart, to say, hey, I need some wisdom, your wisdom or whatever. And then others, it sounds like, CJ, would you talk us through a little bit, sort of like what you were thinking when, because it's cool. And I'm trying to understand what were you maybe thinking when you were responding.
So you said, what would you say? The question that I'm reading says, what do you want to say to the Fool?
Mm-hmm.
So that's like, okay, I'm putting my daughter on the airplane for her first ever trip in her life, and off she goes all by herself, underage, etc. That popped into my head because that's my most recent experience.
Okay.
What am I going to say? And I'm looking at, I have 8 fools, well, really 7 fools in front of me. And I know what we just talked about. So he's all this carefree, happy-go-lucky, not paying attention, head in the clouds. And I want to tell him, great, enjoy your journey, go in with your whole heart. But at the same time, you're going to need to be at least forewarned that you're going to need to get ready and prepared to give yourself self-care at the times where you deal with difficulties, obstacles, and hurts. And some of those will be very deep. And at the same time, never have any regrets. So it's giving him that as a gift as he departs on his journey, because you asked, what are we going to say to him?
Yeah.
I think that's really great. I love that came into your mind about putting your daughter on the plane, because you're saying that to the Fool, but you're also saying that to yourself and to all of us as we begin whatever endeavors we may be beginning. Because
yeah, and I'm about to cry right now. So
in a sense, we are, in a sense, all of us are the Fool, because we're beginning this journey together, right? So that's really profound and important, particularly the self-care aspect. And if anybody follows astrology and such, yesterday was the actual beginning of the age of Aquarius.
Oh.
yep,
So
on winter solstice.
I know. And here we are. I love it. It was so touching when I read, everybody's sort of contributions here are really so cool. And I love this sort of like, let me sit you down, dear Fool, sweet Fool, right? And from this sort of wisdom of life lived, say, these are the things that you're going to be encountering, and you've got to take care of yourself in this way. Right. And it seems like that pure nurturance, right, that comes up and about, and thinking of the Fool as thinking right now we're watching The Mandalorian. My sweetie and I got a Disney Plus. We decided to get the Disney Plus because we wanted to, friends of ours have watched The Mandalorian. They said it's so wonderful or whatever. And I don't want to do any spoilers here, but you've probably seen just in pop culture Baby Yoda, right? If you haven't. So this idea, and it's not Master Yoda, it is Baby Yoda. It's the same species, but a different, different embodiment. It's not completely different being, but watching this sort of baby that's 50 years old, right? So moving through all of these scenarios just kind of reminds me of how The Mandalorian is its caregiver, right? And is cautioning, and yet, Baby Yoda is probably the wiser of everybody there. But it's that lovely kind of nurturance, to see this, you know, bounty hunter slash mercenary who always had that sort of soft underbelly, but was sort of, wears that sort of armor, that very specialized armor of protection. And it's, I think, beautiful, because I think that's what happens, right? In life, in our life journey, we develop a kind of, we call it different things, a thick skin or an armor, or, wisdom, or what have you. We call it lots of different things, but essentially comes to the same thing, right? Which is this we've learned through life.
Well, really, they should do a Mandalorian tarot, because the message of the Mandalorian. I haven't watched the whole thing. I'm terrible about that. If there's a documentary series, I'll watch it all in one night. But anything
Right.
else,
I know.
but anyway, the kinship of the Mandalorian and the in the child, right? They're both foundlings, right?
Yeah.
The fool's a foundling, right? Anytime, before we begin the journey, that's what we all are. We're all foundlings. We all found our ways, and we meandered our way somehow into this group, for example, right? Or what have you. But we're foundlings on the road in some sense, and that's cool. That's
Yeah. Wow. And with that, we are at 8:27, and our endpoint for the night is 8:30. And I want to honor that, because I know that we all have other things we have to attend to. But I wanted to see if there were any sort of last thoughts.
do we do this every? Are we still sort of committed to doing this every week? How does everybody feel?
Yeah,
about-
let's hear from the collective here. If we do this one card a week study, we figure doing the card study is much more practical, since we all have a variety of different decks and we're at different places. This just makes so much more sense. But if we stick to the card study and like move through the entirety of the tarot, that's 78 weeks worth of study.
Or we can do the suits. We can do a suit a week once we get to the minors, if you want to. But
that's probably better, right? We don't have to do each and every one, although that could be interesting, because
it could be, because some of them, they're all different, right?
so different. But
Well, I think it would be cool to somehow make it fit into 52 weeks and end at the same time we're starting in a year.
Cool. We can
There's a number of different ways to do that, because we could do the 22 majors, and then do the 10 suits, and then the other weeks, like we can do the numbers 1 to 10 like together, and then we can do the knights and the queen. There's different ways we can
cards. Yeah, the court cards.
Yeah, the court cards. We can do the court cards differently, and those are really different from deck to deck.
They are. They really are. I mean, and what we could do is, like, off the call, we could just kind of talk amongst ourselves, like have the group, like I'd set up a group chat. And so if everybody is wanting to continue that group chat, we can continue that. So we have a moderator and admin group chat, and then we have one that was everybody who RSVP'd yes tonight. We can continue the conversation there and get that sort of feedback. Or we can also just, another way to do it is you can also post a poll or a post. So there are lots of different ways that we can do that and get that kind of feedback. But I think there's a way that we can certainly come up, because I think coming full circle in one full turn would be really beautiful.
Then we can study something else.
Yeah.
Like maybe end near the winter solstice in 2021.
Yeah. I love it. I think that's great. I think it's a great idea. So we can certainly do that. But I just want to thank everybody for showing up and for coming. And I think as we figure out some things, like we figured out some technology things, and we figured out the chat's probably going to be the better way to go. And we'll fumble and bumble our way through. And as long as we're all just patient with that and okay with that, I think we've got real potential. And, I encourage you to, I have a few friends who study tarot, right? And I can talk tarot with them, but usually their lives are busy, their parents and this kind of thing. And I'm always able to do that. They live across the country or whatever. So I love having a collective, a group where we can do this. And so I encourage you, if you've got friends, you may or may not have friends, but if you do, invite them to the group. And then if you could post, post what the experience was like to the group. And then kind of sort of generate that. And then I also encourage people to, as you feel comfortable, to practice readings with one another, right? So you can do like what a few of us did, which is we did a reading, then we posted, took a pic of it and explained it. But then we can maybe start a separate thread where people can sort of volunteer to do readings for each other, just to get some practice in, because I think that's how you got to read the tarot in order to get good at reading, right? I mean, that's just the thing. It is truly a practice in that sense. You just don't, you can get a book smartness about it, which is something I think all of us can do. But if we're trying to get at that sort of depth of being able to read for someone else, that really does require practice. At least it does for me. So
I've been pulling cards for everybody for the past few weeks, just like, yeah. So yeah. And it's really it's really kind of a slap in the face when everything's going a certain way and you get it and you're like, how is this possibly going to apply, and then something happens out of the ordinary, which happened to me a couple days ago, and I was like, oh crap, that's exactly it, and the image on the card was almost exactly what happened. It's like, oh.
And then it's amazing, the more you work with the tarot, I think it becomes a lens, right, where you see the world. I mean, you kind of see, you're like, yeah, oh, there's a fool, I know, there's a this, so there's that, there's the justice, there's the, I mean, I was like, for a while there, I was thinking, I was in graduate school, and I was like, oh, my PhD work is in performance art, basically, kind of performance studies, really, and
Quiet.
performance art. And I wanted to do a whole bunch of, at that time I was conceptualizing doing, one of the cards from the Major Arcana into an installation piece, right? A live installation.
Ooh.
And it's really interesting because it never came to fruition. There were other things that happened, unfortunately. But now when I look around, especially in the art scene, there are all sorts of folks who are doing tarot installations. And I think that is so cool, right? I was like, there was a point at which the sort of collective here was, thinking about this, and finally somebody kind of brought it into fruition. So I think that's really neat. It's really a cool thing. So yeah. So anyway, guys, thanks so much. I feel sort of like full. I feel full. I feel like I've learned, like my knowledge is deepened. I'm thinking about the Fool in a very different way than I was when I first arrived. And I will be thinking about the Fool until next time. But like once a week, we didn't finish that. So once a week, we were thinking about once a week for about an hour 15, hour 30, depending. We don't have to run the full hour and a half if we run out of stuff, juicy stuff to say, right? But yeah, we can do that. So I can schedule another one for next Tuesday at 7:00. And then just to get feedback from folks and say, the 7:00 time still works or it doesn't work. And if there are enough people where it doesn't work, then we can go back and look at another day, maybe. So yeah, I'll post that. Yeah.
I like this. Now, Kurt, did you start this Zoom? Are you the one that did this Zoom link?
Well, yeah, it's my Zoom account, or it's my.
Okay, so do you mind, Denise? Could you, Kurt, stay on for like literally 4 minutes with me to let me still click on a couple things and read a couple things and like ask you a question or two and then be done?
Yeah.
Before we shut the whole thing down and everybody else can leave if they want to?
Yeah, let me, I'll go ahead and end our recording here if I can figure out where that button is.
Yeah, I know, right?
I'm used to the iPad, and I'm not using the iPad at the moment. I'm using a different thing.
Oh, it won't let me go up. Oh, there. No.
Oh, here we go. Here's the stop record button. All right, our recording for the 12/22 session of the San Antonio study group is officially ending. Okay.
And Denise, I wanted to thank you for this because even though I misplaced all my notes